Good evening, members, and welcome to this meeting of the Barbican Estate Residents Consultation Committee. My name is Isaac Thomas and I'm clerk to this committee. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. A recording of the public meeting will be available on the corporation's website following the end of this meeting for up to 1 civic year. Also, a reminder to members in the room to please use the microphones for the benefit of those joining online. Chair.
Hello and welcome to this afternoon's meeting. Having highlighted you should use your microphone, please speak clearly in it, and it would be really helpful if you could give your name the first time you speak so that people listening in know who you are. A welcome to Isaac, who's going to be supporting our committee going forward, which is great. We've received apologies from Sandy Wilson, who and Richard Setcham will be representing Shakespeare House in his absence. We've also received apologies from Rodney Jagelman, John Taysom and Nicola Baker. And Judith Finley is not able to join us tonight.
Thank you, Chair. At item 2, we have member declarations under the Code of Conduct. No declarations have been received in advance of the meeting. I'm seeing none in the room. At item 3, we have the minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of January 2026.
Thank you. There's no director's report. I think in the hope I don't think Dan wanted to make the pack any longer than it is. So as we go through the minutes, perhaps we'll ask questions where there's matters arising that aren't in the papers later on. So any questions on those? Jim.
Page 7, Chair. Sorry, Jim Durkin. Just a query on the minutes. Page 7, third paragraph from the bottom. A member noted his previous request concerning the statutory obligation to conduct audits. The director advised he had no further update. Would follow this up and provide an email response outside of the meeting. Just to note that no email response was received. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I know that there's an answer to that in the actions. So Dan might have been right about doing this at the end when we do the action, so I apologise for that. And it's been deferred, but hopefully we'll get an answer.
I'm apologies, Chair. I am hopeful that having drawn the director's attention to it, it will now get a response. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm Stuart Linus from Mountjoy House. My point is on page 9, where there was some discussion in the minutes about PPM. First of all, I'd like to ask whether we have a complete timetable of or costs for the PPM schedule. I think we'll go from one by one, yeah.
So the PPM schedule that was delivered to this committee showed all the scheduled plan preventive maintenance that needs to be done on the estate. Not every single one has a fixed date or programme. We've started with specifically on balcony cleaners and drainage inspections on 3 blocks, but the remaining phasing of that is yet to be done. So it's in progress, but not everything has been phased in terms of when it will happen.
Okay, that's on timescales. What about costs?
So again, each individual block will have to have what your blocks had in terms of the final measured meter surveys. Once they've been done, then their costs will be finalised, and that's how that will be communicated.
Okay, so there isn't yet a complete plan which is costed and timed for PPM.
I think the majority of things are in there. We know when they're due to be phased. I think if you're asking if we have the granular specific date and specific costs, every single thing's going to happen. No, that doesn't exist. But the frequency of things that need to occur and the estimated associated costs do exist. But obviously, as you will know from the experience at Mountjoy, some of those are subject to some refinement work, and then final costs and Section 20 notices, etc., come out.
Thank you. Am I right in understanding that all the annual planned preventive maintenance costs are in additional to the major works estimates that we will probably talk about later on page 31?
They are separate, yes.
They are completely separate.
Yeah.
Okay. This year, the first piece of the PPM budget, I assume, was in the budget, £1.1 million for drains and balconies, was created for 3 blocks, Gilbert, Mountjoy and Sedham. When I looked at this, I estimated that the cost might be for my flat around £4,000 for next year, which I was quite surprised at the scale of it. That would have represented an increase of 50% on last year's service charges. But in a way, it's just the tip of the iceberg, because the drains and balconies are just one feature of the. So, and since this thing is going to revolve and revolve in perpetuity, we're looking at long-term increases in service charges.
The PPM activity obviously does drive an associated cost with what we do. There are also opportunities there in terms of the reactive spend of repairs should decrease when you deliver your PPM work. So, but the point you're making around the fact that these works have to be funded is absolutely accurate. Yes.
Yeah. So, are you able to tell me when there will be a formal plan for PPM?
So there is a formal plan for PPM, and the sequencing and estimated costs are there. Obviously, every activity has to be refined and go through a process, have measured meter surveys in the specific instance we're talking about. So the PPM schedule exists, the frequency is there, the estimated cost is there. Now, obviously, that will be subject to slight refinement as we go per block and per individual project. But I think the document itself gives the indication of what the frequency and cost will be.
Okay, so turning to the major works and PPM taken together, because although they're mutually exclusive.
Chairman.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Can I just sum up where I'm going on this? What I'm saying is that we have some huge costs to look at this evening, and we also have some pretty huge costs, but we don't really know what they are fully yet, coming from PPM. And I think it's rather difficult for us residents to express views on your proposals when there are such big unknowns about how much we're going to have to pay. Okay, thank you.
Just a quick one on page 10, the project tracker. You probably deal with this later, but it says there's an independent expert review due in March, and I just wondered, how's it going?
Yeah, I can say that very quickly now. The expert witness review hasn't concluded, it's still ongoing. There's been an increase to the scale of documentation that was provided to the expert witness. We're hoping that it will close soon. We don't have a definitive date yet, but yeah, it's still ongoing. It's progressing well. We're well engaged with with Hawkins who are carrying out the review, but it hasn't concluded yet.
Andrew Tom.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a comment on paragraph 13 on page 14. Having reviewed the preceding minutes, we'd like to propose adding a short line to the paragraph to more accurately reflect what the director added at the meeting, and we appreciate what the director added. The proposed line is as follows. The director added that any change to this position would be deliberated in further meetings.
I'm sorry, I didn't really hear that. You haven't sent an email, have you, with this on?
We apologize. We've been just going. We can send that as well. Would you like me to do that, or just also read it out again?
Perhaps if you send the email, we'll hear from Nigel Gilbert, and then we'll come back to yours if that's okay.
Thank you. And lastly, this is a request. We would like officers in future to consider not using words like the legal position, because it begs the question, whose legal position, and it's certainly not a judgment. We believe what officers often mean is that it is an interpretation of a position and is the BO's current position. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, I should have welcomed Nigel Gilbert, who is the new representative for Gilbert House. So we're not going to forget his name. So Nigel, carry on.
Thank you, Joe. I've got two questions just from the conversation that's just passed. At one point, it was said that PPM and the major works programme are mutually exclusive, but I find that difficult because balconies and drains are part of the building envelope, and the building envelope is a major works programme. So how do the two actually fit together? Because you must be costing the major works for the building envelope to include the balconies and the drainage. I'm totally confused as to how the two programmes interact with each other. And the second thing is, am I the only person that doesn't have a copy of the project tracker? Because there wasn't one included in this, and it was noted from the last meeting that the project tracker hadn't been included in that meeting either.
Yes, please do.
So I'll deal with the first question first, because we were going to deal with this as part of the capital expenditure plan, but I can lead into the position now. So just for complete clarity, the Planned Preventative Maintenance Programme is a programme of works that is to maintain the existing infrastructure that we have across the estate. So that could be anything from the balconies, the drains, you have it for water tanks, lifts, and any asset that we have on the estate. The Capital Works Programme is to do with, capital funded works that are cyclical in nature and occur over a period of time. Now, you're correct that the two documents do need to work together in terms of the way that you program PPM and the way that you program capital works have to have a link, because otherwise you could be doing things like programming a replacement roof a year after you've just done a lot of planned preventative maintenance work on it, and that is the next stage of this process. What we are presenting today and what we want to focus on today, and we're happy to take any questions around PPM and interactions away with us, but the focus of today is we have given a list of the assets that are across the estate, and following a lot of information from Savills report that was done back in 2020/2021 and the other things that we're working on more recently, we're creating a picture of what the capital works programme over the next 30 years looks like for the Barbican estate. Owen will go into more detail when he presents the paper around what that looks like in terms of more detail. But I think the point around the PPM interacting is correct. We've always said that the documents need to interact with each other, but we've created these from a base position of 0, and so we've had to create the PPM tracker. We've then had to create the capital expenditure plan, which is brought here today to discuss, and then at a time in the future we will see how the two interact and make sure that we're not tripping ourselves up with duplication of works, etc.
But also, when the drains and balconies were decided which blocks would be dealt with under PPM, they were considered to be the blocks that would be further down the building envelope project. So where we think we need to do the drains and balconies every 5 years, they're certainly 5 years down the line for the building envelope. So we do need to keep doing PPM on the buildings, even though this big project's going to come up, but we're doing it on the ones where it's probably furthest away, if that makes sense. And the project tracker, I think we'd agreed it would be every other week meeting, we should be getting a proposed agenda plan coming to us soon, hopefully to the next meeting, and that will enable us to make our views thought about whether the frequency is appropriate or not.
Okay, thank you.
Jim.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of quick questions directly on the minutes. From page 11, have the minutes of REPCOM and the Major Works Programme Board been published on the website?
We're awaiting feedback from the website team, but they are on the app now as well, which we're in direct control of. I'll have to double check on the website and drop you a note on that. But the request has been sent that they're put onto the corporation website. We don't directly control that, but I'll do a note after the meeting and let you know.
Fine. On page 10, it talks about the report from the independent expert witness. Was supposed to be completed by the end of March. Have we got it?
Yeah, just
sorry. Okay, sorry. I obviously missed me. Apologies. Was the planned preventive maintenance programme actually circulated to all service charge payers?
No, it wasn't, and the reason it wasn't is because we were awaiting, and we said this at the last meeting, we were awaiting the transfer of Elkins and in-house, so that we didn't send two in the space of 2 or 3 months, because obviously at the moment Elkins are carrying out a lot of the activity on there for us, and what we didn't want to do was send one and then send one again. We did note that at the last meeting.
So it hasn't gone out to all service charge payers?
No, it's only been seen by this group.
So does the intention remain to send it out to all service charge payers, and if so, when?
Yes, it does. I'll have to get I don't have an exact date. The in-house, which we're going to speak about a little while later, is due to go live still on the 1st of July. So probably even shortly after that, when it's accurate and reflects the accurate position.
Okay. Last question, and this is sparked by the contributions of Stuart and Andrew. I'm getting nervous about the fact that we're going to get billed for reactive repairs, planned preventive maintenance and major works. But they're going to come to this committee as separate reports. I quite like to see the aggregate picture of that so that we're clear what the overall spend on repairs is, and it's not parcelled off or separated out and reported in different ways. So my question is, are we going to get an accurate report on the total cost of repairs on a running basis?
So our intention is to give an aggregated report that combines a planned preventive maintenance programme with the CapEx report. That is our intention. That
and
again,
reactive repairs or not? Because you've got 3 repair streams, right?
Yep.
You've got reactive repairs, a lot of which is coming in-house, but not all of it, because there'll be some specialist firms which are not. You're going to have Major Works Programme Board, and you're going to have planned preventive maintenance. That's 3 separate streams that you're presenting papers on. Leaseholders like me may struggle to cross-reference all of those and integrate them. So my request is can we have one aggregated picture for this so we know what's being spent?
So yes, and that is our plan, to have an aggregated picture at some point in time. I think what I really stress for this committee, these documents have not existed, and so we've had to build these from the ground up over the past 12-18 months. They are documents that the estate has never had before, and what we have to do is make sure that in isolation the documents are correct, and then provide the aggregated picture for you, because they are documents that can be or do work independently. You're absolutely right. As leaseholders, you want to see the big picture, you want to know the big numbers over a period of time, and we're happy to commit to that, and we've always committed to that. But what we have to do is get the individual structures and documents right in the first place.
I think leaseholders are going to see big numbers, whether they like them or not. My question remains that the importance of bringing these together so we can see the totality.
Yeah, and we have to commit to that. Yeah.
One question was about the app.
Yeah, so the app went live at 4 p.m. today. We've already had over 225 leaseholders sign up, so over or just under 10%, which is really good in the first couple of hours, and we'll continue to monitor that over the coming weeks.
Lucy.
I just want to the combination of the app being live and repairs being behind. I just want to know about being overwhelmed about repairs and how you will manage.
So we have a specific resource at the moment that's dealing with things coming through the app, and we're also working through the repairs backlog at the moment to ensure that they're all logged appropriately as well. So we think we're sufficiently resourced.
And a small question, just how one lodges any kind of repair ticket as a house,
As a sorry, which
as opposed to an individual.
So if a user logs a ticket for a communal issue, that will then generate a works order number. If an individual raises the same issue, we won't raise a new ticket or works order number, but we will provide them with the existing one so that they'll have a record of what's been raised. So we're avoiding duplication there.
Going back to Jim's question about bringing those 3 reports together, I'm a bit confused as to the timing of when leaseholders are going to be seeing this information. Is it going to be after they get hit with the cost? Because that's what seems to be what you're suggesting.
No, what I am suggesting is that these documents at some point in time need to be brought together. They are, the biggest part of this expenditure is a 30-year capital plan. And in the report that we've got today, we have said there needs to be a lot of rationalisation work to be done to see what, actually needs to be carried out over the next sort of 5 years. Is that block specific or estate-wide? We're going to get consultants in, and again, Owen will talk much more about this when we get to the actual paper. What things can we keep going if we make small investments? So for example, there are things on there like the Garchi system that is a cast iron system that is in there for capital replacement, which it should be because it is beyond its expected life cycle. But then we need to do some extra work around, well, we're not going to replace something just because it's beyond its expected life cycle. Is it safe? Is it appropriate for make some smaller strategic investments in that and carry it on for a longer period of time? As the covering report states, what you have in front of you today is a position of the assets on the estate, their end of life cycle or projected end of life cycle when they need to be replaced. That's important information that people need to be aware of, as soon as possible. Now, when we come to actually looking at phasing the works out, integrating with PPM, that picture can change. It can look very different. It's an evolving piece of work that will go on for a very, very long time, and it will, it'll be updated every year. So, it's continually a 30-year plan and a planned preventative maintenance program. I understand that obviously there are, concerns from leaseholders around the big numbers that are in those reports, and again within the report and the covering report itself, that is addressed. There is a lot there. There's a lot that the estate needs, and we need to be realistic and let people know about the investment that is needed to protect the estate and protect the assets that all leaseholders own and enjoy. But there is a very realistic piece there around finances as well. So with that, before we do any more PPM, CAFEX stuff, I'd like to bring Owen in, who put the time into the report once we get there.
Sorry, just to say, Andrew, I haven't seen your email yet with your wording. If we defer the minutes and perhaps move on to the major works, and then when we've got that email from Andrew, we can consider the minutes and approve them, hopefully. Stuart.
Ask one more question, and that is that how is it that if so much work remains to be done, 3 blocks have already been told what they're going to have to pay next year?
So that's the plan preventative maintenance is a different document that has been through this committee and been approved. The plan preventative maintenance needs to happen in various aspects, irrespective of the capital works plan. Now, what we've done in terms of your specific blocks is we've identified that they are relative to the estate best performing blocks in terms of waterproofing, the condition, etc. And therefore they will be at the back end of the major works program because it's not required now. Now, for us to get you to the back end of that program, we need to be doing the cyclical maintenance that we should be doing to ensure that it doesn't get into a worse condition and therefore, bring forward your proposed building envelope project. So the plan preventative maintenance program doesn't stop in that sense just because the capital expenditure work is here. What we need to do is be very considerate of the fact that they both coexist and they need to be talking to each other so that the issues that you quite rightly raise at the moment around timings don't happen in the future. But if we don't start this work, if we don't start investing and protecting in these assets quickly, then we'll be in a worse position and a worse position and a worse position. So it's really important that we start driving specifically the planned preventive maintenance work as quickly as possible.
Yes, okay, but we were not consulted.
So obviously it was the Section 20 consultation was issued. We received responses to that consultation, and I think the stage 2, if hasn't already, is due to go out. We budgeted in this year's budget, which hasn't hit the bills yet. But following all the work we've done with the House chairs, etc., we'll do it in June, and they will obviously be carried out. But there was consultation done, both statutory and non-statutory consultation.
Well, not before the budget was approved. We were not consulted until it was already in the budget. There was a provision already in the budget.
The budgetary provision was made, but we haven't drawn down any funding because we haven't gone through the Section 20 process yet. Yeah.
Jim.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm a little confused. The 3 blocks which were selected for balcony maintenance work are the 3 blocks with the least history of repairs and are therefore regarded as in the best state. But at the same time, you say that we really do need to press on with this work so that the buildings don't deteriorate even further. One might think that in those circumstances, what we ought to be doing is focusing on the blocks which are in the worst state, because those are the ones where the needs are most pressing, not the blocks which are in the best state, where the needs are least pressing.
So I think that we're conflating some issues here. The planned preventative maintenance programme is designed to prolong the life of the buildings. The buildings that have the worst existing problems, many of which are being dealt with through capital works programme and reactive repairs. With the planned preventative maintenance, what we're trying to do, and what is the right thing to do, is to start with these buildings and move them forward, because in terms of otherwise they will become like the buildings that you're talking about. They're not mutually exclusive, though. We're not saying we're not going to do anything on the blocks that require investment, but the way that you structure and program your PPM is around, certainly at the start, around protecting the assets that are in good condition. Doesn't mean we don't do anything about those that are in poor condition, but we work across all the blocks on the estate.
But my difficulty is the major works programme doesn't really seem to kick off until 2029. That's 3 years away. And I worry about the blocks which are already regarded as poorly performing are going to wait for another 3 years before anything happens. Blocks which are perhaps not quite so bad could well get pushed significantly beyond that. I am worried that we seem to be spending an awful lot of time planning without actually any repair work taking place. And if we don't start doing repair work soon, every block is going to end up in as bad state as the worst performing blocks, and it's going to get a lot more costly to repair them. But the delays seem to continue. The date when this gets started is pushed out. And can I just say, I thought these were major works, not capital programmes. I thought in RepCom the other week, you pulled us up about capital spending and said, these are major works.
Major works, yeah. Okay, I'll take the point away.
And certainly the Major Works Programme Board considered the phasing and agreed that it was appropriate to do the houses that were further down the queue for the building envelopes, because there's no point doing work on the houses that are going to get a new roof in the next 4 years, hopefully. Yeah.
And that says to me there's going to be a lot of blocks which are way beyond that 3 year mark before anything moves.
I think in terms of when we say not starting as well, I think there's a real thing there around it's not that we haven't started, that work has started. I think what you're seeing in the capital expenditure plan is the date of which people will be on site. There's a raft of work happening at the moment around the appointment of architectural consultants, etc., which I'm sure we'll happily talk about in a minute. So it's not that we're not doing anything. That's when boots will be on the ground, and we can talk more around some of the complications around listed building and building safety regulator, for which all of those things that we need to, hurdles that we need to go through are included in that program. So we're not saying we're not going to start looking at specifically building envelope stuff until that time. What we're saying is the work's already underway, but that's when boots will be on the ground actually replacing roofs. Thank you.
Shall we move on to the major works delivery forecast, or initially the major works report?
The minutes
Agenda.
agreed.
No, we're going to wait until we hear from Andrew Tom.
Okay.
If we can get something from him before the end of the meeting.
Yeah.
If not, then so we'll come back to that later.
Okay. At item 4,
Should be
Chair.
coming through.
Thanks,
Thank you. At item 4 is the Major Works Programme Board. This item is for information on page 17.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's probably, my report covers 2 things that are in the packs here today. I think it's probably best if now I just pass on to Owen for the major works report at item 5.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, the major, we've been working over the last couple of months on a major works program for the next 30 years. We're looking at an approximate value at the moment of about 275 million. Of that, 65 million will be city funded work. And that city funded work covers works like the podium project, the fire signage program, and the fire doors. So a good portion of this will be city funded. Obviously the building envelopes, that's yet to be decided. That's another 53 million, which is potentially to be decided based on the outcome of the expert witness and the city and residents, and that's yet to be decided. So we're essentially looking at a program which is made up of building fabric and building services. We are essentially looking at the bulk, a good portion of our work is going to be around the mechanical and electrical services. We're looking at a building now which is over 50 years old. Our SABs were commissioned to undertake those condition surveys back in 2019. I've spoken with the consultants who undertook that survey and had in-depth conversations with the director who undertook it. And what he was really, the message he was giving me really was that our building services are over twice their design lifespan. So they've far exceeded their design lives. But what he did say though is it's a testament to the design, the quality of the materials, and the workmanship that went into putting those building services in. He said they were built to a high standard and the quality of the materials were very good. And that's why he's saying that's why a lot of our building services are actually still in reasonably good nick. I think his message to me really was that a lot of the services are good, and he has forecasted that a lot of the work does need to be done within the next 10 years. But what he's saying is not necessarily all of that work needs to be done in the next 10 years. What we've certainly found, and that's borne out with a lot of our experience as well too, we've found actually that we have building services which have components which are still fundamentally good. So like our lifts, our structural side to our lifts are actually quite good. So we found instead of doing complete renovation and refurb of it, we are actually able to keep a lot of those portions of the works and save considerable amounts of money. In other areas like the Garchies, where Basal was actually said, look, yeah, we need to replace our Garchies, we're finding actually our Garchie systems are actually quite good. They're cast iron. They're not going anywhere. Yes, there are components of the Garchie system that are vulnerable. So our electrics and our electronics, those parts do need to be replaced. So what we'd like to think is a lot of our building services, a good portion of them can actually be retained, and we can push a lot of those costs out. Now, at the moment, the report that was undertaken by SAVLS essentially says that you need to replace everything. And at the moment they're saying that those costs are the worst case scenario. Well, so we'd like to think that actually we don't actually have to spend the amount of money that they said we need to spend. So the next stage for me and the team is to appoint building services consultants to go in, tell us exactly which services are our priority, and which buildings are our priority. And we need to identify those priorities, both in services and in terms of buildings, in terms of developing a strategy, in terms of moving forward. That will feed into more accurate costs. So we'll get more accurate costs, and we'll be able to develop more accurate timeline as well. That will feed in obviously to feeding you obviously more accurate information in terms of service charge costs. So that is the next stage. To bring it to the next stage, we need to resource. The BEO at the moment do not have the resource to take these projects forward. So I've identified a complement of 6 senior principal project managers to take these projects forward. We're looking at in the next 2 or 3 months to appoint 3 of those PMs. So once we get these people on board, we'll be able to take the process forward with appointing consultants, looking at designs, identifying our weaknesses, identifying our priorities, and fine-tuning our program. What I'd like to think is we can push a lot of those costs out, and so the cost, a large portion of those costs lie in the next 10 years. I think those could be pushed out, reduced, and actually pushed further out. So I know there's a lot of shock and a lot of concern about the quantum. It's a lot of money, I appreciate it. What I suppose we don't want to do is tell you, look, it's going to cost X amount, and 2 years later it's going to be twice that or 3 times that. That's not going to help you either. What I'd like to start was with the figure that Savos had given us, and work back from there and try and improve on that number. You know, so it's going to be an evolving program. I've been in regular contact with Joe in terms of feedback, in terms of how we should present it, and in terms of programming these costs. And it's going to be an iterative, evolving process. So that'll continue over time. I'm just thinking, is there anything else there? So in terms of other, I suppose, implications, then we're looking at risks. Yes, there's risks in terms of the not doing anything. If you don't do anything, it's going to devalue and degrade the facility we have here. It'll ultimately lead to higher costs, repair and maintenance costs. So by not doing anything, we're really not doing you any favors. We're not serving you well. And by not telling you that, look, these works need to be done, we're not doing you any favors either. So while it's not particularly helpful or good news, by not telling you, it's not going to help you either in the long run. So I think it's better to be open and upfront with where we're at and where the building is at, and take it from there. What I would say is, Jo has been very good. She's identified an accounting error on my part. So the total actually of 275, actually, it didn't include a 7 million figure for declarations. So that actually is an increase of 7 million on that 275 figure. There will be some more amendments which we need to adjust for in that calculation, and we'll do that after RCC, and we can circulate it to members, and it'll go forward to BRC.
I don't think we realised that there were 4 cyclical redecks in the period, so that's another 7 to add to it.
Yeah.
So I make it 287 million at the moment.
So,
David.
Sorry to button at this point, Joe, but later on I was going to comment on the structure of these numbers, because it seems to me that you're missing a trick in how you can present them to residents. You're starting with your large number, you're then taking off your corporation responsibilities. Then there's a whole chunk in there of things which actually residents are already anticipating, because it is for cyclical redecoration. They get used to them. It is for lifts which happen every 25 years. Once you start taking that out, then you're actually trying to tackle the core of the major works program of things which perhaps haven't been done before and should have been done before.
And I think we've got to get to grips with the presentation of this, both in terms of what's going to end up with service charge and what may end up by blocks. And until we've done that, I don't think anybody's really going to be happy they can get to grips with these numbers.
So when we have our building service consultants appointed, they will feed in block by block in terms of where our costs are. And we'll be able to give greater detail, granular detail in terms of block by block, in terms of where those costs lie.
Is the request there something around displaying activity that we have always done as an estate office, such as Redex, against things that perhaps appear that we might not have done, to demonstrate that? Or
the danger is that residents will read this number, not read it as a 30-year number, not even know. Sorry. Residents will interpret this without any real background. The more they understand that some of these costs are already billed to them on a regular cyclical basis, even if it's a sort of 3-year, 5-year program, or even the longer term fact that we've done lifts before, we should expect them to come up regularly, the more it will ease some of the concerns coming up.
Yeah. One of the things I will just say as well is that this document is very much a document intended for the purposes of RCC and BRC. In terms of our resident literature, obviously we're looking to send something out that will be much more user-friendly, bite-sized, and something that is much easier to understand. And that was part of the discussion that we actually had today around that, including the PPM and reactive repair, so that whole picture is talking to each other. We wouldn't be sending this spreadsheet, but for example, to global residents. But thank you, that's helpful, David.
I just wanted to ask a question about this concept that we will reduce repairs by improving our capital up front. At the moment, our budgets for recurrent expenditure only run for 1 year at a time. But if we make an investment, we're going to be saying down the road we should save some repairs costs, which suggests to me that we really need to extend our management accounting for repairs so that we can set targets for that and make sure that we do get the benefit when the time comes.
We'll take that point away. I think I don't think we have a response of how we would potentially do that at the moment, but we're happy to take that point away.
I'm trying to understand the messaging. So the first one is the messaging to the BRC. You're quoting numbers. Are you expecting the BRC to actually approve those numbers in view of your comments earlier on that the numbers?
No, at this stage, this is just for information. What I would say is all of these projects here will go through their own governance procedures and each and committee procedure. So each will have its own separate approval process.
Right. And the other one is house groups. Are you going to be sitting down with the chairs and allowing the chairs to say, yes, we want a face-to-face meeting with Owen or whoever to discuss the minutiae of what all this is about? Because somebody needs to be managing the expectations of all these leases.
So one of the things that we've spoken about and we've been really clear about is the fact that this plan is obviously in the context of the entire estate. And one thing that we need to be really mindful of is our buildings, even within the estate itself, can be at different life cycle stages for different assets and different requirements. And therefore, what Owen's saying around bringing in the building services consultants in is to really get that block by block picture. Once we have the block by block picture, then of course there'll be a requirement for more granular discussions with house groups directly, because what you'll have there is a differing picture. One of the things that we'll then need to pull together is what that looks like in terms of phasing and opportunities, because every building is not in the same state, and every building will have differing priorities around. One building might have to have the roof done first because it's in a really, really poor condition. Another building might have really, really bad problems with its internal drainage structure. So what we're not going to do is unilaterally apply a project across the estate if there are requirements that buildings need to be focusing on different things. And I think that's something that we really need to look at and probably get used to in terms of this program, is that there is potentially different buildings that are going to be doing different things at different times.
And because ultimately the leaseholders get with this, there is an understanding that leaseholders, you cannot make a decision about implementing some of this stuff until you've got buy-in and have had time for the leaseholders to come back and ask their questions, because I'm pretty certain that a lot of people will be asking questions.
Yeah, what we really want to do is get to a position where we have all the information in terms of design information, where our needs are, our priorities are. And once we have that design information, we'll be able to cost it then. So let's say in terms of the building envelope, we'll have to look at our roofs. Each building will have a different design solution for its roofs, its water shedding, its windows, and each building will be unique in terms of its services requirements. And that needs to be finessed for each building. And to get that quality, granular information, we need to get consultants in to tell us exactly what needs to be done, where our shortcomings are. And once we know what that is, we can cost it, and we're in a better position then to inform you. At the moment, we just don't have that level of granular information.
The lessons learned from the expert witness review, which is that going to be incorporated in?
Yes, so all the information that comes from the expert witness will be viewed by our design consultants. They will be given those documentation, they'll see them. And the lessons that have been learned will certainly be picked up within those documents. Yes, absolutely.
Just on your point, Peter, as well, that this is obviously a very indicative high-level document. The plan is that each building will end up with its own 30-year plan. So, and again, that will be something that on a granular building-by-building basis, we then run through with the house chairs and the house group and have that level of conversation. One of the things that we will do, though, because we don't want to miss economic opportunities, is then look across the spectrum of the buildings. And if there are 3 or 4 buildings that are looking like they need to have the same project at the same time, we obviously then want to try and package that up to achieve economies of scale. So it's around respecting the individual situations that each block is in at the moment, but not losing any of that bulk purchasing power and ensuring that we're aligned across the estate.
Just to say, the expert witness is building fabric only. So it should adjust the early figures, but nothing to do with the later figures.
Taking a step back, work the expert witness has looked at and some of the conclusions. Some of those conclusions, I'm assuming, would be applicable throughout all the work being done.
Yes.
On the people.
Yes. And just to add to the information that's coming from the expert witness, what we'll also be doing is phasing. So any lessons that have been learned on the first 1 or 2 or 3 phases will be applied to all the other subsequent phases. So there'll be a large part, and a part of that will actually be retaining the same consultants for those different phases. So all those lessons will be reapplied. Yeah.
Tom has had his finger up. I thought he was trying to point someone out to me, but there you go.
Couple of things. I think obviously there's a lot of concern about the size of the numbers, and we cover that quite well. I think what's worked well on the lifts and the towers is there's been a dedicated resident working group set up and engaged at various stages in the process. I think what would be helpful, as well as thinking about how we communicate what's in this pack in a way that's digestible to residents, because I think broadly it isn't at the moment, it needs to be distilled in some way, would be also setting out a kind of very high level bulleted kind of process that will be gone through for each of these pieces of work, i.e. you'll get the survey in, that'll happen first, you'll then put together a specification. Residents will be involved at that stage. You'll then tender, presumably, and again you'll involve residents in that. You'll then deliver and continue to involve. I think being clear on where those processes happen, where Section 20 happens, where there are further. Because you're right. I mean, you've said that we're not being asked to sign off, but we're happy on this number. It's more informational as a kind of potential worst case at this stage. But I think how giving residents clear understanding of how that process will be followed for each of these projects or pieces of work, I think would be very helpful.
Yeah, I suppose just to reiterate, we will be going through governance and gateways for all of these individual projects. There will be resident involvement. We have the major works, and they're very much involved with evaluating and reviewing our documentation as it goes out.
And that's fine, but I think there's a point about, I'm talking about not just the few who are directly engaged, but how we communicate with the wider group, resident population, and newsletter, etc.
And I think there is just really quickly, there is just a big point there around the fact that we're engaging at this level at this moment in time for this indicative document, but our intention is not any time shortly. And so we've done all of this work that is positioned in the paper and that Owen has discussed to be sending broad communications until we've started to refirm these numbers up and actually have the consultants come in and we really get that understanding of what the costs are, what we can push out, what the condition is, etc.
Right. So Lionel and then Sally.
Just one small point about the fire door replacement programme, is that our front doors?
So
okay, can I just continue then? So it says here we're going to pay 95% of these various costs. And I remember when this happened, this was post Grenfell reaction, we were told that residents would not have to pay for the replacement of their fire doors.
Yeah, the fire doors are city funded.
Okay, so that should be made clear here, just like
so the podium is city funded, fire doors and fire signage are city funded.
Okay, so if that can just be a point,
that's the 65 million there, that's straight away city funded.
Okay, but it's not clear, it sort of just looks like we're going to pay 95% of everything. Thank you.
Sally?
I just really wanted to reiterate.
I think we might have to move the.
I just really wanted to reiterate the point that David made earlier, that this is clearly massive communication challenge, and there are so many things that could change this number. There's the whole expert witness, there's items that are already included in the service charges, there is your general impression that the numbers are overstated, and we've sort of proved that in the recent PPM when the numbers I think nearly halved. I just think it's everyone's reaction here has proven that the communication is absolutely critical in this. I'm relieved to hear, Dan, that nothing's about to be sent out to people, but I think it really has to be scrutinised through Repcom or Major Works before anything happens, because Lionel's comment, it's absolutely how you do read these documents, and that one thing we can guarantee is it's not going to be 287 million. What's the variation? Could be 30% up, 50% up, 50% down. Really, nobody knows. And I just think just having these numbers out there, everyone's just going to really go, oh my God, we've got 275,000 now. It's just so not what is about to happen. I just think it's this whole communication thing has just got to be sort of massively prioritised.
It's recognised by the Barbican a key component of the programme will be affordability. It's got to be done in a way that's affordable. And that if that means we have to push out certain works where we can, we'll do that. So that's fundamental.
I think a lot of that sort of caveaty stuff has just got to go out. And Tam's vital point that nothing's about to happen until these projects are coming back to you as residents, because it's a terrifying number, but not a very light one.
Nigel, and then I see Helen. So.
Yeah, my question's fairly straightforward compared to some of the others. The 30-year plan. At what point does the 30-year plan get extended? Are you anticipating it becoming a rolling item? So in 2027, you add a year onto the back end of the 30-year plan, or are you going to review it every 5 years to extend it? What's the target? Because a fixed 30-year plan doesn't really work.
Yeah. So what could well happen, and it's quite possible that a lot of the work may extend beyond the 35 years, and I'd like to think a good portion of it will. It all comes back to what our building services consultants say in terms of durability, lifespan for a lot of these items. And yes, if we can extend it for some of these items, I'm looking at cast iron tanks and cast iron pipes for Garchies. They're going to be good for another 50 years. You know, we've got a bill there for 3 million for Garchies, which I don't think we're going to need to spend, you know.
I think there's a point there as well that Nigel was raising, and it absolutely is the intention that it'll be a rolling program, so that, you know, we haven't decided exactly what that frequency should be, whether it's annually, biannually, every 5 years, but we know that, you know, at a frequency we need to come back and deliver the next 2 years, so it will consistently be a 30-year plan.
Thank you, Dan. That's the answer I was looking for.
Lovely. Helen.
Yes, so given the timescales and sums of money involved, is there going to be a risk register in place? And it's not difficult to think of things that could derail the progress of the last 2 years, and that would be a tragedy. So will there be risk registers, and who will run them?
Yeah, so each project will be run as a separate project, and each project will have its own risk register, and that'll be managed by the project manager on the job. There are consultants, so we'll have appointed consultants who will obviously review those risks on an ongoing basis, pre-contract and post-contract, and where we can make mitigations on those risks, we will.
You talked about 3 project managers that you're recruiting now. Are they all for resident-based projects?
No, to a city fund.
So I should have said actually 2 of those project managers will be city funded. So one will be dedicated to the podium, and one will be dedicated to the fire doors and fire signage, and one of them will be leaseholder funded. Okay.
Any more questions on this paper? So, Richard?
Sorry, I think my questions are on the on precisely on this, but you mentioned that the Savills view was kind of replace everything, but one of the things I recall from sitting through the Savills presentation is they didn't replace it once, but they replaced it more than once in the 30-year time period. And things weren't expected to have a 50-year life in their schedules. They were much shorter. And I don't have a sense of how much replacement and re-replacement is embedded in these numbers. Yeah.
I'm sorry, we just don't have that level of information.
Yeah. Okay. So it's to
be determined. Yeah.
And just echoing what Sally was saying with the communications channel, and I think inevitably when papers are brought to this committee, I mean, normally there's something which has got defined edges and here's a number. So I must say that in terms of the time, how much time you spend on the presentation, I would spend a good third on it, on the points that were made about the uncertainties. And this is what Savills would look like if we adopted it. And it's a huge number, but don't worry, because that's not the number. And I think if you start with the figures and kind of try and make them better by taking out the city-funded bits, you're still leaving the impression that it's that big number that we should be dealing with. So as just a point.
No, I really agree with that. I think it's really fair comment. One of the things that I think is really important to obviously just put out in that context as well is obviously this report is a report that's going to the BRC, who are acting as the freeholder conduit. Now, our obligation is, with the figures that we have from Savills, to let the Barbican Residential Committee, acting as the freeholder of the City of London, know and understand, what the risk implications, costs and timelines look like from the Savills figures and put it into a programme. What we're not going to do is then just regurgitate that to residents. We're going to do all the work that Owen has spoken about around bringing the consultants in, refining it, before we get to a position where we go out to all the leaseholders on the estate and give them that level of information. But there is a thing here around the fact that Savills, who are a very reputable firm, have done this. These are the worst case scenario figures, and these are what we have to work with at the moment. Now, I agree. What we don't want to do is give that all out and then have to refine it back and say, well, actually, we're going to do a bit here and a bit there. All that work needs to happen, and then we want to look to give a picture that's much more solid and based in the foundation of the consultants report to leaseholders. And I think that's what we're hearing here today, and I think that's what we're happy to work towards.
I was just going to say, you probably need to make sure residents know that they're going to get something, because they have had the opportunity to see this. So just point out that there'll be more coming out, and maybe put a date on.
Yeah, that's the report.
So in terms of updating the program? Updating the program is all this?
No, as in when we actually go out and set resident communication.
Okay.
We need to tell them now that we're coming.
Yeah.
Well, if I may, climate implications, page 28, it references the city's climate action strategy, but I know that there's not a lot in there on housing residential items. At the risk of adding another layer to the aggregate picture, an unknown is what might emerge from the Ambui study, just to add to the challenges, because if there was a cost benefit analysis that showed that X should be done to the buildings, then that also needs to be factored into other works that are proposed. So I just wanted to put that on the table, that there's an Ambui angle to this, which is at the moment an unknown.
Just thinking of the building envelope, when we come to do that design work and we're looking at our net zero, our architects will be obviously being very mindful of climate and the impact in terms of maybe even moving to, I don't suppose they're going to go to passive, but certainly that those kind of considerations will obviously come into and factor into their design considerations as well too. I don't think we're going to get passive, by the way.
Oh, right.
But yeah, they will be considering all of those action issues.
And Joe, last but perhaps not least, is the subject of VAT. Groans all round, I know. But if you look at page 24 at the summary, there's a figure excluding VAT. There's a figure including VAT. And for most of us, when we see that sort of presentation, you immediately think this is VAT which the supplier is going to add to the invoice, and you would ignore it if you were a business. You could recover it, but otherwise you're going to be hit with another 20%. But here, the city and the Barbican, I think it's settled that service charges aren't subject to output VAT, as people refer to it. It's an exempt supply linked to the property transaction, the supply of land. But the city doesn't recover the VAT which it's charged. And to the extent there's irrecoverable input tax in the jargon, then that increases the costs that the city has borne that are recharged as part of the service charges. So I think there is no VAT which is charged to leaseholders. What we have is costs that are higher because the city can't recover the VAT. So to me, that's a cost line, and that will vary according to whether we're billed by third parties or the work is done by our own staff. So it's a presentation question really, which is, although it may be more work, is it better to show this as costs and analyse the grossed up costs, or is it better to show it as you've done at the moment?
So we had this discussion internally within major work. So historically, I would always show the cost as the gross cost in terms of how much it costs to actually build it, excluding VAT. And they would always be the figures that would be presented to all of my clients. But I think the feeling from the residents on the major works board was that we should show that cost as well as the VAT inclusive cost. I'm quite happy to go away and talk to our colleagues within the city in terms of how we should present those VAT figures, and they may come back with some advice in terms of how those VAT figures should be shown. Dan, you might have.
I was just, on the broader point of what you were raising around the arbitrary inclusion of VAT on service charges. Obviously, service charges are VAT exempt, but what leaseholders do pay is the VAT on goods and services that we administer on your behalf from third parties. And we're happy to take that away. We had the conversation this morning around what that looks like. I suppose the confusion point could be that then people assume that that needs to be added to the gross figure. So whichever way we go, we're happy to discuss it. I don't think we're particularly wedded either way, but just in terms of an RICS service charge guideline standpoint and what normally happens in service charge in the private world with managing agents, they do show the VAT separately. That doesn't mean that we have to, at least I don't think it means that we have to. We'll have to check with Chamberlain colleagues, but we're happy to work with that on a way that leaseholders would find most helpful to present.
Yeah, it was a question rather than a view, but it does seem to me that there may be some benefit in showing it at the cost level, because you are employing more people, and to the extent that the people are employed here, there won't be VAT added to those costs. So presentationally, that may be helpful.
So you'll see on the spreadsheet. You'll see on the spreadsheet on Appendix 1, you have the actual costs on the line year by year, but also you have the VAT inclusive figures. So those figures continue along with both. So you'll see actually year by year the city fund amounts, the VAT inclusive amounts and inclusive amounts.
Now that we've got the larger page versions.
Yeah.
I'll have a good look at it.
Yeah.
What you're saying is we should save money on the PPM where it's being done by the in-house team, is what I think you're telling me. The planned preventative maintenance, which will be done by the in-house team, we're not going to get charged VAT on their salaries. Is that what you just said?
Well, if they're employed.
Yes.
If they're employees.
Yes.
There will be somewhere, but.
So yeah, there's a VAT exemption on all staff directly employed by the corporation for services administered on the Barbican estate.
So bringing it in-house will save us the VAT.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Are we?
And the profit markup. I mean, there are advantages to having people in-house.
Any more questions on that subject, or can we move on to the tower lifts? Okay.
Okay. Yep. Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this report provides an update on the tower lift project, covering Lauderdale Tower, Shakespeare Tower and Cromwell Tower. So, as members will be aware, the lifts across the estate are at end of life, with replacement parts becoming increasingly difficult to source. So, in September 2025, the BRC approved the project at Gateway 1 and Gateway 2 with a budget of £438,000 to progress surveys and develop work specifications. So, the main update in this report concerns the procurement of the lift consultants, so what we've been doing since September. So following engagement with City of London legal and procurement, we've moved to a two-stage tender process, which essentially this approach allows us to conduct interviews with sort of a defined number of consultants bidding for works, so that we can sort of assess the strongest candidates, which we think is important given the scale and complexity of the works that we're looking to produce and procure. So stage 1 of the tender was issued on the 16th of March and responses were received on the 10th of April and are currently under review. we're looking to go out to stage 2 on the 27th of April, and we then anticipate to bring a report seeking approval to appoint the lift consultant at the July BRC. So regarding wider programme, as set out in Appendix 2, or 1 and 2, members will note that owing in part to the building safety regulator gateway requirements, which apply to this high risk building, works on site are not expected or not anticipated to start until October 2027. So then regarding Appendix 3, we've set out sort of indicative flat apportionments for members' awareness and then also for wider residents' awareness. So these budget figures are obviously subject to surveys, designs, competitive tender, and sort of going back to the subject of that mentioned by Richard. So within this report to the committee, these figures exclude that. However, following earlier conversations with the Major Works Programme Board, I've sort of reconsidered this, and within figures going to the residents in the tower blocks, I've included that, albeit as per our discussion a couple of minutes ago, I'm happy to go away and consider how best to package this up for residents to ensure they get maximum clarity on this. And regarding sort of next steps, as aside to looking to appoint a consultant, I'll also be attending individual meetings with the tower blocks to discuss these documents being presented today. We'll also be arranging my next meeting with the tower lift group following receipt of stage 2 tenders to discuss those tenders and our next steps from there. Yeah, happy to take any questions.
How much resident involvement has there been in the tender process, and are they going to be involved in the interview process as well?
Yes, so regarding resident involvement, so we have a tower lift group set up which includes, I believe it's 3 residents from each tower, perhaps 2 from Cromwell. So we've been meeting on sort of ad hoc basis, I'd say, as and when meetings are required to review documents, and the tower lift group have been extremely helpful in developing tender documents. They've been giving good reviews and good feedback on the scope of works required for lift consultant, sort of looking at what our current lift uses are and any mitigation strategies required here. Also sort of key risks from a resident's perspective as well. The next meeting with the tower lift group is going to be booked in following receipt of the stage 2 tenders, which will probably be early June, and this will be before we've concluded our review of the tenders. Regarding resident involvement in the tender review panel, at present, this is not the intention, but the BEO can review this and confirm whether residents' tenders can be made in terms of at the appropriate evaluation points of this.
Morning.
Just a quick one out of interest, how many tenders have you received?
So for stage 1, we've received 7 tenders on different consultants.
Was that what you were expecting?
We pre-market engagement we did in December, we had 12 responses, albeit a couple of those responses were from sort of multidiscipline project management firms who haven't tendered for the actual lift consultant. So slightly less than expected, but on balance and reflection, probably as I should have expected.
Just following on from Joe's point around resident involvement in tendering, we're going to have a lot of tenders over the next few years, and we need to get clarity on what sort of level of resident involvement is feasible in tenders and have a kind of agreed approach to that. I think there was some dissatisfaction in how much we were able to get involved in the repairs contract. I mean, the repairs contracts, I don't want to speak about it really, but I think the level of involvement we got from our reps, they were not overjoyed with. So I think it'd be good to get to a position of what is the art of the possible in terms of resident engagement through that process, and then they get that answered once and for all, so that then that becomes the expectation for all these other things we're going to need to tender going forward.
We will take that away with colleagues in procurement.
Yeah. So we will have working groups for each of those different projects, major works progress projects, and obviously residents will have that opportunity to feedback in terms of documentation, and we'll obviously take that feedback on board.
But you'll take away the question about
Specifically about evaluation to procurement.
yeah.
There are complications there around what is and isn't possible, like you just said, in terms of commercial evaluations, etc. I think we want our residents to be involved, but it has to be in line with the law and as you say, the art of the possible. So we'll take that away. We'll review ecology and procurement, and I think it would actually be really helpful to have that not just for the tower list, but as a as a baseline moving forward. This is what we can do. This is what we can't do. And if we position that as a single paper around resident involvement and tender evaluations, then we can thrash it out, hopefully agree what we agree, and then that can be a principle moving forward. What I don't want to do, especially coming up into this big program of work, is be arguing over what that evaluation looks like on every project.
David?
Quick one on the consultancy costs. I can't understand quite from what's presented whether the consultancy costs are already rising or they are being constrained, because it talks about the estimate consultant role was 240,000. So that's an expectation of the whole project life. Have they gone up since the original estimates?
So we haven't actually received costs from the consultants yet as part of the tender. So the stage one's only been on experience sort of narrowed down, so we haven't had.
So
yet.
At the moment, these are budget estimates for costs.
But they haven't changed.
Based on the market norms for the value of this nature and type of work. But we'll have tenders back after you're in the stage 2 and we'll have the figures.
So regarding the budgets in here of the 215,000, that budget was basically up to contractor appointment without additional costs thereafter. Based on a pre-market engagement, sort of median costs we were getting for the full consultant involvement was 270,000, which I would say, given 215 is up to contractor, wouldn't.
You'd be clear with target groups where
Yes. Yes, yeah, of course, yeah. It is, yes. This is based on the anticipated project programme being 3 years.
Jim. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report, Will. Can I just clarify? The actual work, I think this is going to be my obsession for several years now. The actual work in terms of replacing the lifts, with the following wind, you're not assuming will commence until October 2027. Okay.
Correct.
When do you expect it to be completed in the towers?
So based on very high level estimates we received from our consultant, we're looking at, they've said a week per floor, per lift. So we're to give it a budget, we've said 3 years, essentially. So
we've got 18 months between now and when work commences. And then we're assuming that there will be at least a 3-year period before all the lifts are actually completed. So we're talking about a life from here, and there's a good deal of work already being done. I'm not ignoring all the work which has already been done, but the work, given all the work which has already been done, we're 4.5 years away from even the tower lifts being replaced, and we haven't even discussed the terrace block lifts yet. I hope I live long enough to see the conclusion of some of these projects.
So do we, Joe.
Yeah. I think it's. I think it's just at this point really important to say as well that the tower lifts and the corridor block lifts are not mutually exclusive. We're not waiting until the towers are finished until we do work on those, and we have a new report on that and what that's looking like coming to the next meeting, which is going to be really important for the remaining lifts on the estate. One thing I would just like to highlight on lifts as well, I know Dan Castle isn't here today, but for 3 weeks in a row now, touching a lot of wood, all 81 lifts across the estate have been working and operational when we sent the bulletin out on a Friday. So I think that's something that we should celebrate.
A couple of questions from me. One is just clarification. On page 36, you talk about appointing a lift consultant and then cost consultants, heritage. will the lift consultant be engaged in the recruitment of all the other consultants that are needed?
Yes, my intention is for them to have involvement in that.
And I noticed from the plan that you're expecting building safety regulator approval within a relatively short space of time. Is that?
Yes, so bit of a tricky subject that. So on existing high risk buildings, the statutory time period is 8 weeks of approval, albeit as of earlier this month, the BCIS as a medium timescale to reach decisions across all applications was 34 weeks with a 67% approval rate, which was up on 49% approval rate 3 months prior. So that is down quite considerably from, I think it was 46 weeks earlier, sort of late last year, albeit trying to predict what that timescale will be in 16 months time is difficult. So there is a big caveat against a programme of we are at the mercy of building regulator. We'll know close to the time what those timescales will look like. And perhaps I should have added a couple more weeks, but it's, yeah, it's TBC.
I'd like to think we can improve on those timelines.
I would hesitant to comment.
Would you?
Yeah.
But one thing I will just say though at this point is that obviously all 3 of the towers which are being done have got their building assessment certificates from the building safety regulator. That obviously removes a layer of complication in terms of a lot of these buildings with a lot of the longer turnarounds. For high risk building project work will not have those and therefore are under additional scrutiny in terms of their mandatory occurrence reporting, etc. So hopefully that will work in our favour when it comes to providing those project applications that the buildings are already classed as passing their assessments by the building safety regulator.
Robert Beckson from Seddon. Dan, great news about the lifts, but you did touch on terrace lifts. I know this item is on tower lifts, but when I look at the works programme, I see that the tower lifts have a significant spend in many ways before the terrace lifts have significant spend before the tower lifts, including £2 million next year. I'm concerned about how this is conveyed to the terrace blocks, because as far as I'm aware, we know there's a problem, which you got around temporarily. But if this spend is necessary, which it is, I believe, I'm really concerned about how we get and liaise this to the various terrace blocks residents. And it's great news that we're getting on with it.
I absolutely take that point, and we have a lot of work to do on that. In regards to the terrace block specifically, in our programme we have a full report on those coming to the next meeting, at which point we'll be happy to discuss those levels of details, and we'll have a lot more in terms of the documents that was produced here. So we have a similar looking forward picture for the terrace blocks.
So we'll move on to the report of the reporting committee.
Thank you, Chair. There's a few specific reports under this, so unless anyone has any questions in the interest of time, I'd be happy to move on to the individual reports that are contained within.
At item 8, we have the Barbican Estate Redecoration Programme 2020 to 2025. This item is for information on page 51.
Thank you. So this report reviews the Barbican Estate Redecoration Programme covering 2020 to 2025. Within the report, was reference to providing differing bronze, silver, gold standards for sort of the new decorations project. Just want to clarify on this where sort of what these terms from a bronze standard would still be to an acceptable standard for the estate to get us from A to B for the next 7 years of redecoration. I'm not looking to suggest that we'd come to you with a substandard level of redecoration which wouldn't be fit for purpose. With that said, the bulk of the report sets out lessons learned review across 4 key areas. So these being the scope, the tendering, the site oversight, and the snagging. So in summary, the team found specification appeared diluted between the tender stage and the sort of individual property specifications. There was opportunity to do a 2-stage tender with interviews for potential contractors, and no interviews took place, which we think would have benefited the tender stage. The site supervision and progress reporting were not at a level expected for a project of this sort of size. And the snagging process could be more rigorous with better documentation in the future. Regarding finances, the full review of project finances has been undertaken. A copy of the completed review will be brought to a June meeting, and these finances and lessons learned will all feed into an outcome report, which will come to resident consultation committee in June and the RC for decision in July. If I could take any questions on this.
Just to make sure that Willoughby's perspective, you're aware we have this outstanding complaint. Yep. So whilst I'm sure this is fine, you are still aware that you need to resolve the outstanding complaint in addition to doing this program.
Yes, I'm conscious of outstanding complaint there, and I'm also conscious that, you know, there'll be a number of considerable redecoration issues, possibly across a number of blocks here. So we're conscious that, you know, officers will be completing block inspections over the next couple of months. So as part of that, we'll be asking the officers to sort of note any areas that are particularly dilapidated and sort of in need of urgent rectification, so we can package these up to complete sort of a.
Can I just interject?
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Over a period of 4 years, 3 years, I don't know how long, the BEO has agreed the action steps that need to be taken, but have failed to implement those action steps. So we're not expecting further inspections. We're expecting action.
Yeah, so obviously with Willoughby and a couple of other blocks, we have some specific things that are project tracked and logged, which we're not suggesting fall away or dismissed from this report. What we are suggesting is that from a global estate-wide perspective, there were serious things that didn't go right that residents have let us know about, not on a granular basis for things that we're talking about, but on a global level of the contract. So I think there are two things at play there. What we're saying is that there are some things that it's going to be not economical or practical for us to deliver on a separate program of works, and that we will push into the next phase of the redecorations. But there will also be things that's not acceptable for, that we need to deal with, that we've been on alert for, certainly such as the track that we've got. And what we're saying is that those will be taken under consideration on an ad hoc basis. This report and the purpose of this report is obviously setting out a position that globally, as a contract, this did not work. What are the things that did not work globally, and how are we going to put that right globally, notwithstanding that there are some ongoing conversations specifically at block level.
So I might just add to that, Dan. We will obviously be employing our new PMs. Our new PMs, well, one of them will be taking forward the next program of redecoration, and the lessons learned from this will be applied going forward.
I don't think continuing discussion is required, because there's been continuing discussion for years. And as a result of those continuing discussions, there's been agreement by various people in the BEO of the actions that you guys were going to do. And yet nothing has happened.
I think so this report is the closeout report for the project as a whole.
Right.
We're not saying that supersedes anything that we're discussing with you at the moment. What we're saying is this is a project report for lessons learned and moving forward for the global contract. But as I say, that doesn't negate conversations that have already been had at block level with people like yourselves at Willoughby.
So we look forward to having a resolution to our issue. Please. No further discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Will for the report. Can I just pick up on the next steps? Second point you make, clear commitments around the management and the next redecoration projects. I understand that's a paper that's going to come in June. Can I just emphasise that in that management, I think there are two essential points about resident involvement. One is in the tender process. We've already talked bits about that. But I think the other is in when the decorators are actually in individual blocks, can we please listen to residents when they're saying this is not working, these guys don't know what they're doing, they're making a mess. I don't want to deal with it 3 months later, 6 months later, or 3 years later, as Peter's saying. I want to deal with it at the time, because if we deal with it at the time, it gets fixed. So I think your management has to say, this is how we're going to involve residents block by block in the redecoration to make sure problems are dealt with immediately and not left for wrangling later. Otherwise, we just continue to perpetuate the patterns of the past. I really don't want to. I want to move forward.
Yeah, I think there's an acknowledgement that the management wasn't what it should have been during the course of that decoration work, and we will rectify that going forward for our next cycle.
But including resident involvement, not just your project manager, include resident.
Your microphone's not on.
Saying it's not enough to have a project manager dedicated to this. We need resident involvement on a block by block basis when the redecoration is taking place.
Yeah, just to add on that, I've seen the benefits of resident engagement on the lift project, and I think take your comments forward and put to paper.
I have one point about the last paragraph on page 52, which suggests that a range of cost options will be provided in relation to the frequency of visits by the Clerk of Works. I believe the frequency of the visits by Clerk of Works should be set by best practice, what it should be, wherever that comes from, and that there's agreement with the contractor that if he has to do more inspections because the work isn't of appropriate quality, the contractor pays.
Yes, happy to take that away.
Thank you. And also the next specification will take into account any recommendations in the upcoming expert witness report. These documents are going to be sent as late papers to the expert witness, as we feel that it's further evidence of, it appears to be evidence of problems that the previous administration created. So we're going to make sure they see the appropriate documents with regard to the redecorations project as well. Any other questions? Right, move on to the.
At item 9, we have the repairs and maintenance policy. This item is for information on page 55.
Thank you, Chair. Members, this item is the repairs policy, and the purpose of the policy is to provide an operational framework for the estate when talking about in-house maintenance services. This is going to the BRC for approval. The policy is a document for us operationally at the BEO that sets out the standards, the operational processes, the governance arrangements, the quality, accountability and value for money of the service, and is also a reference material for residents. So if they feel like they're not getting the service, everything is clearly set out on what they should be receiving. I'd like to thank particularly members of the reporting committee who fed into the first version of this and really helped some of our refinement and formatting on that. I'm happy to take any questions that members may have on the detail. Appreciate it's quite a detail orientated document, but if anyone has anything, then I'm more than happy to accept questions.
Nicola Baker sent me a question on page 77. It refers to vulnerability and reasonable adjustments and encourages residents to tell the city if they need them, but doesn't actually tell them how to or who they should contact in the city. So perhaps that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we can add that.
So Claire Hurst from Lambert Jones, forgive me, I've got no voice. I think this is brilliant. I think it's really helpful and useful to work through and really comprehensive. I was just going to ask for those how it will be published. So will there be, for example, a hyperlink so you can drill down, because it's a really beefy document, and if you just want to find a particular item or you just want a summary, how it will be published so residents can access it easily.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea, and we can tab the relevant headings and subheadings so that people can, drill down into what they need to find easily to navigate the document. I don't have a problem with that, and I think when I come to publishing it with my colleagues, we can look at making that really easy.
See if it stays on this time. If appointments are missed, no, sorry, page 2086, 25 on the actual document, 4.4 for city or its contractor misses an appointment, what happens? Would that be reprioritised? Because sometimes when you miss an appointment, you fall back into the, if you like, general melee of what's being organised. And I wonder whether priorities need to be mentioned there in terms of either elevating it or being sure that it's attempted to be met within the original commitment.
If the original appointment is missed. And if we say yes, of course, and if we need to be a bit more explicit about that and making sure that it's reprioritised, that's fine. We can look at that. Yeah, I'm sorry, I thought you meant if the resident wasn't in, but no, of course, if the city can't make the appointment for whatever, then ensuring that that is not then put to the back of the queue, if you like. Yeah, we can look at just providing that wording.
Thank you, Chair. Page 82 in the main document, financial control and value for money. I may have missed it in this section, but I'm not clear when it spells out what is actually going to be the process for checking invoices. I understand the process for estimating the costs. I'm not at all clear what the process is for checking invoices. And I have to say our previous experience is if invoices don't get checked against the work actually completed, there are all sorts of problems. And I think we need some explicit commitments and a statement of process in here about how the invoices will actually be checked. I'm not assuming you check every invoice, but I think there has to be a programme for saying we check 10% of small invoices, 25% of bigger ones. We check 100% of all large invoices. We have to be clear who's doing the checking. And is this just say, well, the invoice adds up, or is this actually checking that this correlates with the work which is in the repair invoice? So let's be clear, it hasn't always in the past.
Okay, so I might just answer that. Yeah, in terms of responsive repairs, what we'll find going forward with our in-house team, the time that when we send staff out to site, their time will be recorded. So we have that time, that cost, and any materials that are associated with that job are recorded and obviously built on that basis. We can look at benchmarking that against other private work. So we're comparing like for like, and we're getting an idea of how our in-house service compares to external contractors. So we're demonstrating value for money. What I would say is all of our invoices are checked by our contracts manager, and well, they should be. They should be.
We were told in reporting committee that only invoices of £1,500 or above were checked by the contracts manager. My point is, most reactive repairs cost a lot less than £1,500.
Yeah. No, I mean we all of our so we have all our invoices should be checked.
I'm with you, Owen. Yeah. I think all invoices should be checked. Yeah. I'm just saying that what we were told in RepCom was that not all invoices are checked. Only invoices of £1,500 or more are checked.
No.
I think we'll take that away because obviously it needs to form part of the policy if it's not in here. I was looking because I thought it was, but we'll take that away, and when we come to do the iteration that goes to the BRC, we'll make sure that there's a mechanism in there that explicitly says what, if it's 100%, if it's 50%, and at what value.
Thank you.
Pauline.
Just a quick one on page 95 with the appendix D. It shows the number of vacancies. It doesn't actually say the actual number, but there are quite a lot. Do you have a timescale for filling these?
So there's a process that's going to happen in terms of operatives from Elkins that will 2P over, and there's going to be some recruitment as well. The transfer of staff in terms of 2P is scheduled to happen on the 1st of July, and they transfer over. So some of those vacancies will be filled by that transition, and the ones that we have to fill, we'll be aiming for the same time frame of the 1st of July to have the service fully set up. It may be with notice periods and the people that we employ, etc. There might be some variation to that, and I think what we would be happy to commit to do is just give you an update in the July meeting on what vacancies are existing then at that point.
Any other questions? No. Okay.
At item 10, we have the Building Safety Resident Engagement Strategy. This item is for information on page 97.
Thank you, Chair. This is our Building Safety at Resident Engagement Strategy. This was part of our literature that went with our building safety case and has been reviewed and endorsed by the Building Safety Regulator. We've, as you can see from the appendix within the strategy, what we've done is we've tried to signpost residents that pages 9 and 10 are the critical bits of information. And actually one of our things that was born out of RepCom is that page 9 and 10 should be produced into a helpful leaflet for or two-sider for residents, because that's where the most important information is. A lot of the information and requests in here are statutory, so when we talk around person-centred fire risk assessments, personal emergency evacuation plans, etc. And there's some helpful information towards the back end about the city and links for some of those forms as well. What I didn't do, which I did in a previous pack, was print ones for every single building and make the pack 500 pages, but they exist for all the buildings across the estate, and the intention is that we would get one signed off and then we would send the relevant ones to all the buildings across the estate. I'm happy to take any questions that members may have on the document itself.
No questions? That's great. Clear document, thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Lucy, did you?
It's not on the document, but I'm just concerned. I'm really about training, staff training and fire. It seems inconsistent.
Yeah, thank you. I think we're happy to undertake a review of that around, porter involvement, CPA involvement, ensuring that everyone understands what role they're playing. That will be an ongoing piece, and there'll be training across the estate for our staff to ensure that everyone understands fully what they're expected to do or not expected to do, importantly as well, if a situation occurs. Thank you.
And just an update on the documents that they hold and as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, okay.
At item 11, we have the Barbican Resident Guide. This item is for information on page 115.
Thank you. So this resident guide has been developed to bring together key information from various sources into one more easily accessible document. Its primary objectives are to ensure residents understand how to report repairs, how to access services, how the estate is managed and who is responsible for what in the BEO. Also, what's expected from residents under estate regulations and under their lease, and where to find support and further guidance. Just important to note that this document does not supersede the lease. The lease remains the legal document that governs resident obligations. The document will be available at all times on the newly launched app today, in fact, which will help not only new residents settle into the estate, but also provide a reference point for long-standing residents as well. And with this is published on the app rather than a physical copy, it allows us to keep this as sort of a live document and regularly update it, whether that be the frequently asked questions that we include or the organisational chart that's included. We can ensure that residents are getting the most up-to-date information as possible. And the purpose of the guide really is to reduce confusion and improve efficiency in how residents access services and report issues, and reinforce estate standards and expectations to support a safe and well-managed living environment. So yeah, with that, I welcome any questions or any suggestions.
Yeah, I've just got a small point about the general estate regulations and the sort of home improvements. I think it'd be really helpful if they were stuck together, because the biggest issue with those is noise. And with the excessive noise and pets and stuff, I think it would be good if it was, because a lot of people are renters now, so they don't actually see the leasehold agreement, right? Excessive noise should not be generated between the hours, particularly between the hours of 11 and 7, and that sort of kind of takes away a bit from, the force of the prohibition, which is, in the lease it says you number one, you will not make any noise that will transmit to other flats, you know, period. So it's got to be like harsher. I mean, clearly that's not going to be the case, you know, like sometimes just something else. So, and definitely not between, so just something a bit stronger, you know, that's all I'm saying. And then put it together with just the home improvements, because that's, I mean, I know of at least three problems fairly recently in my block where there's been noise and stuff, and it's been sorry, I've got, you know, tail end of a cold. You know, renters who probably don't get it. So excessive noise should not be just, I don't know, stronger. Please refrain from using the guard sheet ever. That would probably be good. But yeah, I know I'm not forget the guard sheet comment. Just trying to be funny. But yeah, the noise, it should be like really no noise should be heard in other flats, even though it is, you know, especially through events, whatever. But yeah, just don't turn your flat into a gym, for example. That's one issue someone told me about.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'll note that.
Yeah,
just review that wording. Yeah.
Strong. Okay.
Thank you, Curtis. Just a couple of comments, please. So this should be completely obvious, but it isn't. In the gardens, could you add "don't pick the flowers"? I've seen many people, sorry, that's an exaggeration. I saw somebody photographing proudly her daughter picking the flowers. So we could have that added in. Then on the Q&A, can you add how to get your meter read? I think that I hear a lot about that where I am. And also the organisation charts still showing house officers. Is that still the role? How does that all work?
Yeah, thanks. Noted on those first points. And on the house officer point, there is an HR exercise that's still ongoing. So their current positions are still house officer, but we do still plan on updating those. And that should be by the summer, they should be finalised and updated. And that will change automatically on the
term.
Well, now will be the app, and that will automatically filter out to who you need to speak to. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a really helpful document. I'm just conscious there are various kind of sources of information now. We've obviously got the app as of today. We've got the website. We've got this document as well. I'm just concerned that we have an exercise to ensure there's consistency across the various sources of information. So you don't have one thing on noise on the website, one thing on noise on the app, one thing on, yeah, so it's all consistent across the piece, basically.
Yes, thank you. Noted on that. Yeah, so a lot of the information is being pulled together from the website. So there shouldn't be any contradictions, but we'll continually review that and make sure that all the messaging is the same across the board.
Thank you, Chair. Just to build on Lucy's point, please do not pick the flowers or remove the plants, which happened recently in the bed outside the Barbican Centre. If you go along, there's clear evidence that in a number of cases, primroses were dug out and removed, which is particularly unfortunate, I think. Yeah.
Any more questions? Right, next one.
At item 5 are the working party update. No, item 12, sorry.
Okay.
Item 12A is the Gardens Advisory Group report.
Thank you, Chair. I'm aware time is running on in this meeting. I'm very happy to take any questions. Otherwise, the report stands.
I have a quick one. It's a point really, which is that the paper mentions that residents have been consulted with and have been asked by the Shakespeare Tower House Group to say that they don't feel that they have been consulted, but we are in correspondence. So hopefully that will take its natural course.
Thank you. Noted.
Any other questions?
Item 12B is the service level agreement working party report.
Thank you, Chair. Again, in the interest of time, I'm happy to leave this just to questions, although I would like to emphasise the recommendation in the third part which is to add 2 new members to the working party. It's a small working party. If you have a couple of people who are on holiday, it becomes very small. Both Peter Reid and Pauline Faselli have volunteered their services. I'm recommending to this committee that they be approved as members of the SLA.
Yes, hopefully the retcon will finally get its act together, and it'll be a short-lived membership. But anybody got objections to Peter and Pauline doing that? Okay, lovely.
Yeah.
At item 13, we have the outstanding apologies.
Yes.
About I'm not sure whether this is the question. This is the place to raise this question about the 82% of the fix. It's the non-urgent repairs. Is it? Is it the place to raise questions about that, about the non-urgent repairs?
Certainly.
It's just that it suggests that our experience is that very few repairs have been done, and the 82% were puzzling. But I'm asking the wrong person.
Well, you're not asking the wrong person in the sense that, sorry. You're not asking the wrong person in the sense that we reviewed the numbers provided by the BEO, which says that 82% of repairs are completed within the relevant time. I'm aware opinions vary. If I talk to Dan, Dan will tell me the numbers underestimate the success of this. He has lots of anecdotal evidence which says 110% of repairs are completed within the time. I exaggerate slightly, but Dan is very positive about it. Equally, I'm aware if I talk to ordinary residents, I mean, maybe the only residents who talk to me about this are the ones who've got continuing problems, but they will tell me that their repairs never get done. After 1, 2, 3 reports, still nothing has happened. I don't know whether the 82% is accurate, but I'm sure Owen is about to tell us that the new Barbican app is going to give us absolutely precise information and allow us to track the progress of every repair.
Well, tracking and list would be great.
So what I would say is previously we were obviously at Civica and the EasyBop, and the two didn't marry very well. So closing out jobs, whether they were practically complete or pending completion, very often didn't happen, and the contractor didn't update those. So a lot of the information we were getting wasn't actually accurate. So what I would say is a lot of them were complete or pending completion, but weren't actually recorded within the system accurately. Going forward, obviously we have our app, and the app will, when the contractors are coming to completion, the job will be marked as pending. So we'll have a far accurate, more accurate data on completions and pending completions.
Thank you for that. Can I just clarify? I should have asked this in the SLA working party and I didn't. The existence of the app, will we continue to use Civica to record repairs?
Yep, yeah, we will, yeah.
And I'm going to hate this. Can I ask whether we have built an effective interface between Civica and the new app?
Yeah.
So that information is seamlessly moved across, or are we talking about dual entry?
No, unfortunately, there is no overlap or syncing between them. It's just not possible. The technology isn't there for it.
Right, no, it's not possible. It just hasn't. We just haven't done it yet.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not possible. We just haven't done it yet. In this version of the interface.
We are working. We have employed IT consultants to work with us on our Civica to improve our IT and adapt it to our needs, specifically at the Barbican.
So just for everybody else, help me out and make sure I've understood this. Civica is the piece that contractors rely on to tell them about the work, to allow them to report they've completed, invoice it, and the rest of it. So there's going to need to be, however it's done, a feedback from Civica back into the Barbican app to say this is where we are in terms of completing this or not completing this, if this data is going to run as a significant information system about repairs. Is that right?
Agreed. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And I'm not sure that solves the problem, Lucy, but I think you can see that we are trying hard to stay on top of this.
And what I would just add as well is that although I am an overtly positive person, I am acutely aware that we are not achieving 110% or even 100% or even 90% of repairs at the moment. However, what I will say, and as members know, and as some of the papers today, especially the repairs policy, have positioned, you know, a lot of our work is going into the investment of the future and ensuring that we do achieve those targets. And you know, I would be lying if I sat here and said we were satisfied as a group of officers with the way that service is performing at the moment. But that's not, you know, solely down to the people within the service. That's down to a range of factors, including, you know, still transitioning to this in-house model. But I just want it on the record that, you know, like our residents, we as officers are also not happy with the current position of where repairs are. We understand that there's an improvement needed to get to those sort of, you know, 95, 98% numbers that we're all striving towards.
Okay, we're going to go back to the minutes. I've got Andrew's email. You should have it as well. In page 14, under any other business, there was a section on Brandon News, and he would like to add to the minutes. The director added that any change to this position would be deliberated in further meetings or future meetings. Further meetings. So this was in relation to the Brandon News cap, talking about whether the cost of work was recoverable and the project tracker.
That's fine. We're happy to commit to that. Yeah, in terms of you know, any proposed position in terms of finances or any change will be brought back to the RCC is accurate. Yes.
Yeah. So is everybody happy we add that to the previous minutes and approve the previous minutes with that added? That's nods at this end. So Andrew, that's done. Thank you for sending it through on an email.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone.
So just actions to go. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. At item 13, we have the outstanding actions for information at page 165.
So there's a lot of work being done on this. I'll just note that there's proposals to close 2022-01, in 2023 numbers 2 and 3, 2024 numbers 4, 5 and 10, 2025 numbers 13, 22, 23, 29, 31, 33 and 35. Is everybody happy that those are closed?
Yes, I know I got earlier a bit exercised about decorating. So I think we're, from my perspective, I'm happy to lift 2302 in the knowledge that there is still an issue. There's still a complaint.
And I think one of the things that we had been doing with the action tracker that we're now moving to not do is we've been, you know, there'd be an item that was a very, very specific question that might fall into a broader remit of work, and we were using it to update the broader remit of work. And actually, as an action tracker, what we need to do is close off the very specific questions that are asked, and then if new questions arise, they, you know, so it's all tracked and closed out. So that's the position change, so that hopefully it's a much easier tracker for members to keep a hold of.
So also 2024-07, which is on page 167, it's suggested that one should also be closed, but a new action opened where the BEO would track progress on smart meter upgrades across the estate. Is everybody happy with that as a proposed? And then finally for me, 2025-24, which is on page 169, it's been suggested that it should be closed, but this is actually asking for the terrace lift proposal, which we haven't yet received. So I believe that one should remain open.
Yeah, we're happy to keep that open until the next meeting, Chair, when that report arrives.
Right. So I can see Claire's got a question on perhaps some of the others.
Yes, it won't surprise you that my question is on the first one around Lambert Jones. In principle, we have no objection to it being included within the PPM. We would just like to understand exactly what that means and what that looks like.
No problem, Claire. I can come back to you offline, and I think Chair, I'm happy to formally close that one at the next meeting if Claire's then satisfied that at the next meeting that she's got that closure.
Thank you.
Yes, and I did have a reservation about closing one, but based on what you're saying, that all makes sense. But I think it comes back to a point we had earlier in the meeting where there was talk of there being a forward plan. So particularly things like, you note that an antisocial behaviour strategy is needed, and I think that's something that should go on that forward plan of papers that we know we're expecting, that then we can have as a future item, that we know that stuff is coming, and it would cover off perhaps some of the questions about terrace lift blocks that we had earlier as well, if we've got that forward plan kind of easily cited. So I think probably do need an action to the effect that there's a full plan coming up, and then that will cover off some of these sorts of questions going forward.
Chair, I'm absolutely happy to accept that, and I know that we're already doing work on forward plans in terms of strategies and what that looks like, so that can be tracked there.
Pauline.
This is about 35 and the house inspections. I appreciate it needs to be closed because the timetable has been issued. Can I ask, if you do it next year, can you make it in a nicer format? There's something about the way it gets sent out, and also I don't know what the scope of this inspection is going to be. Our house chair confirmed that she didn't receive anything about what they, I know it doesn't include cleaning, which is fine, that's a separate issue. And I gather from this meeting that you said it would also include bits of things like, you know, bad redecks and things like that. And for my block specifically, we weren't involved in we haven't had internal decorations in the last, I don't think, 12 years that I've lived here. So that will be is that something we bring up in these house inspections? And have you got a document which says what it's covering? Is it in work in progress?
We shortly will be sending a revised version of the schedule in an Excel format, hopefully much easier for members, house chairs, sorry, to navigate, because we sent the PDF, which is probably less user friendly, and we had that feedback, so we're doing that. The second point, it does include cleaning. Cleaning is on the inspection schedule. It's one of the things that we'll be looking at. Is fundamental to the inspections of the houses. But we have the complete format of what the inspection will be looking at now as well, which we will shortly be sending out to. So yes, in principle, those things will be ticked off in the next couple of days when we send those out to house chairs in preparation for starting the second week of May. Only the schedule. What we have, but what we said in the schedule is that the first officers that are going to be doing the inspections will be sending that those documentation bits to the house chair directly to organise the specific date. Because what we gave in that schedule was a week commencing. Obviously, what needs to happen prior to that week commencing is the officers that are doing the inspections speaking to the house chair, arranging a time to meet, and going through the inspection template and any specialisms that want to be covered on the day. So, for example, if you've got Will, you might want to talk more about redecks, etc. If you've got, let's say, Owen, you might want to talk about, you know, some of your capital works or what have you.
Robert Beckson, point 2601, the PPM works. Dan, I've dropped you a note about this, and this is about the terrace block PPM works. No, I've no issue with drains and checking the downpipes for that and all the rest of it. That's fine with me. I do have an issue about the substrate works because I'm not aware there's a problem. Would it not be better just to do a sampling exercise to find out if there's a problem and then make a decision on whether we need to lift everything?
So the idea around the lifting of the slabs is to lift them, clear debris, ensure there are no tears in the membrane that sits below, and then place back. What we've seen over a period of time, especially in terms of our reactive repairs, is that where debris has got under the slabs, where people have then continually walked over it, it's affected the waterproof membrane, and we do need to clear, under those slabs on a periodic basis, because it does have a material impact on things like causing leaks, etc. But what we did also discuss is that when we do it the first time round and we get that understanding and we're going to record all of that, is then do we look at perhaps a risk-based approach for the next round, whereby if the condition on the floors that are exposed is much worse than the condition of the floors below, is there something there? But I think because this is the first time this has been done and we know that water penetration issues have been caused by these things, we do need to do the full block.
I hear what you say. It's just I'm not aware of a problem at Seddon. Perhaps there is on the other terrace blocks, and I'm not aware that the the slabs have been lifted since the roof was done. That was around about 2000. So to me, there's a big question mark about whether we really do need to do this work and whether a sampling approach would be better. But if there are problems and you've identified them, that's a different matter. There's just a big question mark in my mind.
Sorry, I might just add to that, Dan. We employed building surveyors to do scope surveys, to do analysis in terms of where our problems were on our roofs. And a key recommendation that came back from scope surveyors was to undertake this PPM work, and that was actually the fundamental driver for this program. What we're finding actually under these slabs is that they've actually never been cleaned. So there's dirt there that's there, God, for how many years? We, as part of the tender process, we went out to market to make sure we got value for money in terms of our tenders, and the tender documents and ensure that we had a methodology for doing that. But by all means, what I would say is, if we feel that we're working through it and we're finding that there's very little value or to be gained from doing it, we will stop it. We will keep that under review. Where we're really finding the problems, though, is actually on the top floors. That's really where the problems are occurring, and that's where we'll be diverting most of our attention and focus.
I hear what you're saying, Wayne. I'm just dubious.
What I would say, Rob, is we'll keep it under review as we're working through it, and if we feel that there is very little value in going further, we will obviously take that decision then.
Any other questions on the actions?
At item 14 are questions on matters relating to the work of the committee. I've not been made aware of any questions in advance of this meeting. Moving on to item 15, any other business. I've also not been made aware of any other business.
I don't want to be lynched by everyone who wants to go home. A very quick question, and literally just a quick answer. The governance review, where do we stand?
We have commissioned the governance review. We have populated the document bank for Charles Russell Speechley and Inside the Box, which included going to all House chairs and asking for their constitutions, etc. So that formulates their information bank. They've also got leases for every single building in terms of reference to the committees, etc. We're now awaiting Charles Russell Speechley to come back to us with the next the call that we're going to have, which is going to be the one that outlines how we're going to engage with all leaseholders, all house chairs, all stakeholders that have been identified in the review, and what that process map looks like. And when we have that process map, hopefully in the next 2 weeks, we will then share it with everyone. Our commitments all still stand, that will be very public, very open, and every leaseholder has the opportunity to engage with the process.
Just following on quickly from that, presumably the BO itself has put documents in to this. Can we have sight of those documents? Are they all available somewhere where we can see them?
I can certainly produce a list of all documents that have been sent to Charles Russell Speechley. That's not a problem. I can produce that to this committee, and if there's any document in that list that people want to see specifically, then we can forward that. There's nothing in there that we wouldn't be willing to share. So what I can do for members of the committee, and I'll list it as an action, is I will just produce a list of every document that we've sent, and then if, to save sending all the documents that will be duplicate, if any member then wishes to see a document that's listed, they can ask us for it.
Okay, that's it. Right. Declare the meeting closed. Nearly to time, but not quite. Sorry about that.